The dust rose in small clouds around Beatrice Baker's worn boots as she pressed herself against the wooden wall of Miller's general store, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst right through her threadbare cotton dress. She had never stolen anything in her 20 years of life, but desperation did strange things to a person, and right now her 12-year-old sister Lucy was lying in their tent on the outskirts of Caldwell, Kansas, burning with fever and crying from hunger that had lasted 3 days straight. The year was 1879, and the frontier town of Caldwell had grown rough around the edges with cattle drives and railroad workers flooding through, bringing money for some but leaving others like Beatrice behind in the scramble. Their father had died 2 winters ago from pneumonia, and their mother had followed him just 6 months later from a broken heart and consumption. Beatrice had tried everything to keep food on the table, taking in washing when she could find it, mending clothes for the saloon girls who at least had sympathy for her situation, but the work was sparse and the pay even sparser. She glanced through the window of the store, watching old Mr. Miller shuffle toward the back room, his attention fixed on inventory. The loaves of bread sat on the counter near the door, their yeasty smell drifting through the open entrance and making her stomach clench with longing. Just one loaf. That was all she needed. One loaf to get Lucy through until Beatrice could figure something else out. Her hands trembled as she stepped into the store, the floorboards creaking under her weight despite her slight frame. She had lost weight herself over the past months, her cheekbones becoming more prominent, her wrists looking fragile as bird bones. Her blonde hair, once thick and shining, now hung in a simple braid down her back, dull from lack of proper nutrition. Beatrice moved quickly, her fingers closing around the still warm loaf of bread. For one brief moment she thought she might actually make it, but then Mr. Miller's voice rang out from behind her. "Stop right there, Miss Baker. I see what you are doing." She froze, clutching the bread to her chest, unable to move forward or back. Shame flooded through her, hot and terrible, turning her face crimson. She had been raised to be honest, to work hard, to never take what did not belong to her. And here she was, proving herself to be nothing more than a common thief. "Please," she whispered, turning to face the storekeeper. "My sister, she is sick and I have not been able to find work. I will pay you back, I swear it. As soon as I can manage, I will bring you every penny and more." Mr. Miller's face was hard, his mouth set in a grim line. He was not a cruel man by nature, but he had been robbed too many times by drifters and desperados, and he had grown tired of sob stories. "I have heard every excuse there is, Miss Baker. You steal from me. You are stealing from my family. I should have the sheriff lock you up." Tears burned in Beatrice's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She would not cry, not here, not in front of everyone who was now gathering to watch the spectacle. A few cowboys from the latest cattle drive had wandered in, along with Mrs. Henderson from the boarding house and young Tommy Wright, who worked at the livery. "I am sorry," Beatrice said, her voice barely audible. "I am so sorry." That was when he stepped forward from the back of the gathering crowd, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of a stormy sky. His face was tanned from long days in the sun, with strong features that spoke of determination and character. He wore typical cowboy attire, dusty jeans and a blue cotton shirt with a leather vest, a wide-brimmed hat in his hand, and well-worn boots with spurs that jingled softly as he walked. "How much for the bread?" His voice was deep and calm, cutting through the tension in the room like a knife through butter. Mr. Miller turned to look at him, surprised. "Mr. Nash, this does not concern you." "I am making it my concern. How much?" 15 cents. The stranger, this Mr. Nash, reached into his pocket and pulled out a coin, placing it on the counter with a decisive clink. "There. The bread is paid for." He looked at Mr. Miller steadily, then turned his attention to Beatrice. "Miss, would you come outside with me for a moment?" Beatrice felt dizzy, unsure what was happening. This man, this stranger, had just saved her from arrest and public humiliation, but she had no idea why. Still clutching the bread, she nodded and followed him out into the bright Kansas sunshine. Once they were away from the prying eyes and ears, he turned to face her, his expression serious but not unkind. "My name is Thomas Nash. I have a ranch about 5 miles outside of town. I could use help with cooking and general housekeeping. The pay is not much, but it includes room and board for you and your sister." Beatrice stared at him, certain she had misheard. "You want me to work for you? I need the help, and you clearly need the work. It seems like a fair arrangement. But you do not know anything about me. I could be terrible at cooking. I could be lazy or dishonest or any number of things." Thomas's mouth quirked slightly, not quite a smile, but close. "You are stealing bread to feed your sick sister, not to sell for whiskey money. That tells me plenty about your character. And besides, you are shaking like a leaf and look like you have not had a decent meal in months. I am willing to take the chance if you are." She wanted to say yes immediately, wanted to grab onto this lifeline with both hands, but caution held her back. "Why would you do this for a stranger? For someone you just saw trying to steal?" Thomas was quiet for a moment, looking out at the dusty street where horses stood tied to hitching posts, and a wagon rattled past. "I had a sister once. She died of scarlet fever when she was about your sister's age. I was not there. I was off working a drive in Texas, and by the time I got home it was too late. I swore then that if I ever had the chance to help someone else's sister, I would take it." The raw honesty in his voice, the pain that still lingered after what must have been years, touched something deep inside Beatrice. This was not a man looking to take advantage. This was a man who understood loss and was trying to make something good come from his grief. "All right," she said softly. "I accept your offer, Mr. Nash, and thank you more than I can say. Just Thomas is fine. Can you be ready to leave tomorrow morning? I have business in town today, but I will have the wagon packed and ready at first light. We can be ready." "We do not have much to pack." Thomas reached into his pocket again and pulled out several coins, pressing them into her hand. "Get some medicine for your sister from the doctor. Get whatever she needs. Consider it an advance on your wages." Before Beatrice could protest or thank him again, he settled his hat back on his head and walked toward the livery, his long stride purposeful. She stood there in the street, the bread in one arm and the coins clutched in her other hand, wondering if she had just experienced a miracle or if she was dreaming the whole thing. She rushed back to the tent she and Lucy shared on the edge of town, pushing through the canvas flap to find her sister curled up on their shared bedroll, her face flushed with fever. Lucy's brown hair stuck to her forehead with sweat, and her breathing came in shallow gasps. "B." Lucy's voice was weak and small. "Did you get food?" "I did, sweetness, and so much more. But first we are going to the doctor." Using the money Thomas had given her, Beatrice took Lucy to Doc Morrison, who examined her thoroughly and prescribed some medicine and rest. "She is malnourished and exhausted," he said bluntly. "But with proper food and care, she should recover just fine. Children are resilient." The relief that flooded through Beatrice was so intense she nearly wept. She bought the medicine and some supplies from the general store, where Mr. Miller said nothing but watched her with curious eyes. She avoided his gaze, paid for what she needed with money left over from Thomas's advance, and hurried back to Lucy. That night, lying next to her sleeping sister with bread and broth in both their bellies, Beatrice allowed herself to feel something she had not felt in a very long time. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, their luck was finally changing. True to his word, Thomas appeared the next morning just as the sun was painting the sky pink and gold. His wagon was sturdy and well-maintained, pulled by two strong horses. He helped Lucy up onto the seat with surprising gentleness for such a large man, then offered his hand to Beatrice. The moment her hand touched his, she felt a jolt of something she could not quite name. Awareness, perhaps, or the beginning of something she was not ready to acknowledge. She climbed up quickly and settled herself beside Lucy, who was looking much better after a night of medicine and food. The ride to Thomas's ranch took about an hour, the wagon rolling across the prairie grassland that stretched in all directions. Wildflowers dotted the landscape in yellows and purples, and the sky seemed impossibly vast and blue. Thomas pointed out landmarks as they went, explaining the boundaries of his property and telling them a bit about the ranch. "It is not fancy," he warned. "The house is solid but simple. I have about 200 head of cattle and a few horses. I manage most of the work myself with help from two ranch hands, Pete and Miguel. They are good men. You need not worry about them bothering you." "Do you not have a wife, Mr. Nash?" Lucy asked innocently. "Most men your age are married." "Lucy," Beatrice felt her face grow hot. "That is a rude question." But Thomas did not seem offended. "It is all right. And no, Lucy, I do not have a wife. I was engaged once about 5 years ago, but she decided ranch life was not for her. She married a banker in Wichita instead." There was no bitterness in his voice, just a statement of fact, but Beatrice wondered if it had hurt him at the time. She guessed Thomas to be around 25 or 26, old enough to have lived some life, but still young enough to start over. When the ranch came into view, Beatrice felt her heart lift. It was not grand, but it was more than she had dared hope for. The house was a solid wood structure with a porch that wrapped around the front, and there was a barn, a corral with several horses and various outbuildings. Everything looked well maintained and cared for, speaking to Thomas's character as a man who took pride in his work. Thomas helped them down from the wagon and showed them inside. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large stone fireplace at one end and a sturdy table with chairs. 2 bedrooms branched off from the main room, and Thomas explained that they could have the larger one since there were 2 of them. "I will move my things to the other room. It is smaller but plenty big enough for me." "We cannot put you out of your own bedroom," Beatrice protested, but Thomas was already carrying his belongings. "You need the space more than I do. Besides, it is decided." Over the next few days, Beatrice learned the routines of the ranch and began to find her place in it. She woke before dawn to start breakfast for Thomas and the ranch hands, making coffee strong enough to wake the dead and frying up bacon and eggs. She cleaned the house, which had clearly been neglected by a bachelor living alone, and did the washing. She mended torn shirts and pants, darned socks, and even attempted to make curtains from some spare fabric Thomas found in the barn. Lucy helped where she could, slowly regaining her strength. Thomas was patient with her, never pushing her to do more than she was capable of, and often brought her small gifts from town. A peppermint stick, a ribbon for her hair, a book of fairy tales. Beatrice watched these small kindnesses and felt something growing in her chest, something warm and complicated. Thomas was not like any man she had known before. He was quiet and thoughtful, slow to anger, quick to help. He treated her with respect, never making her feel like a servant despite that being technically what she was. He asked her opinion on things, from what supplies to buy in town to whether he should sell some cattle before winter. One evening, about 2 weeks after they had arrived, Thomas was teaching Lucy how to rope a fence post, his hands guiding hers as he showed her the proper way to throw the lasso. Beatrice watched from the porch where she was snapping green beans for supper, and something about the scene made her throat tight. This man, this good man, had saved them from starvation and given them not just a job but something that was starting to feel like a home. That night, after Lucy had gone to bed, Beatrice found Thomas sitting on the porch, looking out at the darkening prairie. She brought him a cup of coffee and sat down in the other chair, working up her courage to say what was on her mind. "Thomas, I need to say something, and I need you to listen without interrupting." He turned to look at her, his expression attentive in the lamplight spilling through the window. "All right. I want you to know how grateful I am for everything you have done for Lucy and me. You saved our lives, truly. I do not know how I will ever repay your kindness, but I promise I will work as hard as I can for as long as you will have us. You are a good man, Thomas Nash, better than most I have known." Thomas was quiet for a long moment, his fingers wrapped around the coffee cup. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and serious. "Beatrice, you do not owe me anything beyond honest work, which you have more than provided, but I want to be honest with you about something. When I offered you this job, it was because I wanted to help, yes. But these past weeks, having you and Lucy here, it has made me realize how lonely I have been. This house feels like a home now, not just a place I sleep between work. I find myself looking forward to meals because of your company, not just the food. I am not good with words, but I suppose what I am trying to say is that I am glad you are here, and I hope you will stay for a long while." Beatrice's heart was pounding so hard she could barely hear her own thoughts. Was he saying what she thought he was saying? "I am glad to be here too." "More than you know." They sat in comfortable silence after that, sipping coffee and listening to the night sounds of the prairie. The chirp of crickets, the distant call of a coyote, the soft whicker of horses in the corral. Something had shifted between them, something unspoken but understood, and Beatrice went to bed that night with a smile on her face for the first time in longer than she could remember. The summer passed in a blur of hard work and simple pleasures. Thomas taught Beatrice how to ride a horse, his hands gentle as he helped her into the saddle and his voice patient as he explained how to guide the animal. He took them into town once a week for supplies and church on Sunday, and Beatrice noticed the way other women looked at them, speculating about the nature of their arrangement. She held her head high, knowing she had nothing to be ashamed of. She was an employee, nothing more, though her heart whispered that it wanted to be something different. Lucy blossomed under the care and attention, growing stronger and healthier with each passing day. She followed Thomas around like a shadow when she was not helping Beatrice, learning about ranching and cattle and horses. Thomas was unfailingly kind to her, and Beatrice often caught herself watching them together and imagining what it would be like if this were their real family, not just an arrangement of convenience. One afternoon in late August, a storm rolled across the prairie with frightening speed. The sky turned greenish-black, and the wind picked up until it was howling around the house like a living thing. Thomas rushed in from the barn, soaking wet, and immediately started checking the windows and doors. "Lucy, Beatrice, get away from the windows. This could be a bad one." They huddled together in the main room while the storm raged outside, lightning cracking across the sky and thunder shaking the very foundation of the house. Lucy was frightened, pressing close to Beatrice, and without thinking, Thomas put his arms around both of them, sheltering them against his chest. "It will be all right," he said, his voice steady and sure. "The house has weathered worse than this." Beatrice could feel the solid warmth of him, smell the rain on his clothes, and the scent that was uniquely Thomas, leather and soap, and something indefinable that made her feel safe. She realized in that moment that she had fallen in love with him, deeply and completely, and the knowledge terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. When the storm finally passed and they emerged to survey the damage, they found that a section of fence had been knocked down, and one of the outbuildings had lost part of its roof, but the main structures were intact. Thomas, Pete, and Miguel spent the next several days repairing the damage, and Beatrice kept them fed and supplied with water and coffee. It was during this time that Beatrice began to notice little things that made her think Thomas might return her feelings. The way his eyes sought her out when he came in from working. The way he always made sure she had taken a portion of food for herself before offering seconds to the ranch hands. The way he smiled when he heard her singing while she worked, a soft expression that transformed his usually serious face. One evening in early September, Thomas asked Beatrice to take a walk with him after supper. Lucy was inside reading her fairy tale book by lamplight, and the sun was setting in a spectacular display of orange and pink. They walked in silence for a while, heading toward a small rise that overlooked the ranch. When they reached the top, Thomas stopped and turned to face her, his expression more nervous than she had ever seen it. "Beatrice, I need to tell you something, and I am not sure how you will receive it." Her heart was in her throat. "What is it? When you first came here, I told myself I was just helping someone in need. I told myself it was about my sister, about making amends for not being there when she needed me, and maybe that was true at first. But somewhere along the way, it became about you. About the way you hum while you cook breakfast. About the way you are patient with Lucy even when you are tired. About the way you look at sunset, like you are seeing something beautiful for the first time. I have fallen in love with you, Beatrice Baker, and I know I have no right to say so, that you are in my employ and it is improper, but I cannot keep it to myself any longer." Beatrice felt tears spring to her eyes, but they were happy tears, joyful tears. "Thomas Nash, you are the most foolish man I have ever met if you think I have not fallen in love with you too. I have been in love with you since you sat with Lucy during that thunderstorm and told her stories to keep her from being frightened. Since you brought me wildflowers because you said they reminded you of my smile. Since you showed me how to rope a post and did not laugh when I tangled myself in the rope instead." Thomas let out a breath he seemed to have been holding, and then he was closing the distance between them, his hands coming up to cup her face with a gentleness that made her want to weep. "May I kiss you, please?" she whispered, and then his lips were on hers, soft and sweet and full of promise. The kiss was everything she had dreamed it would be and more. It spoke of loneliness ended and hope renewed, of two people finding each other against all odds. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling, and Thomas rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me, Beatrice. I know this is sudden and you can take time to think about it, but I want you to be my wife. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to build a life with you, a real family." "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you, Thomas. Nothing would make me happier." They told Lucy that night, and the girl squealed with delight, throwing her arms around both of them. "I knew it. I told Mrs. Henderson in town that you two were in love, and she said I was being silly, but I was right." Thomas laughed, a sound of pure joy that Beatrice had rarely heard from him. "You were indeed right, Lucy. You will be my sister now, officially. How do you feel about that? I think it is wonderful. Can I call you Thomas, or should I call you something else? Thomas is just fine. I want us to be a family, and families do not stand on formality." They were married 3 weeks later in the little church in Caldwell, with half the town in attendance. Beatrice wore a simple blue dress that Thomas had bought for her in Wichita, and she carried wildflowers from the prairie. Lucy stood beside her as maid of honor, and Miguel served as Thomas's best man. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, and when the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Thomas kissed her with a tenderness that made the assembled crowd sigh. The reception was held at the boarding house, and neighbors brought food and gifts, welcoming Beatrice officially into the community. She was no longer the desperate woman caught stealing bread, but Thomas Nash's wife, a respected member of Caldwell society. The transformation still amazed her sometimes, how quickly life could change, how one moment of mercy could lead to such happiness. That night, in the bedroom that was now truly theirs, Thomas made love to her with patient gentleness, teaching her body the language of pleasure and desire. Beatrice had been nervous, having no experience with such things, but Thomas was careful with her, making sure she felt safe and cherished. When they finally came together, it felt like the natural culmination of everything that had been building between them since that first day outside the general store. Afterward, lying in Thomas's arms with her head on his chest, Beatrice thought about how strange fate was. If she had not been desperate enough to steal that bread, if Thomas had not been in the store at that exact moment, if he had not lost his sister and understood the importance of helping someone else's, none of this would have happened. They would have been two ships passing in the night, never knowing what they could have had together. "What are you thinking about?" Thomas asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "About how lucky I am. About how everything terrible that happened led me here to you." "I think about that too. About how my worst moment, losing Sarah, somehow prepared me to recognize my best moment when it came." They fell asleep tangled together, and Beatrice dreamed of a future filled with love and laughter and the family they would build together. The winter came, and with it the hard work of keeping the ranch running in harsh conditions. Thomas taught Beatrice how to care for the livestock in freezing temperatures, how to break ice on water troughs, how to recognize the signs of a sick animal. She proved to be a quick learner, and more than that, she genuinely enjoyed the work. There was something satisfying about the physical labor, about working alongside her husband to build something lasting. Lucy continued to flourish, growing taller and stronger. She took on more responsibilities around the ranch, helping with the chickens they had acquired and learning to milk the cow. Thomas was patient with her, teaching her the same way he taught Beatrice, with calm instruction and genuine praise when she did well. One snowy evening in January, while they were all gathered around the fireplace with the wind howling outside, Lucy looked up from her book and said, "Beatrice, do you ever think about Mama and Papa? About how different things might have been if they had lived?" Beatrice felt a pang in her chest, the old grief that never quite went away. "I think about them often, sweetness, and I think they would be happy for us, seeing us safe and cared for. Papa would have liked Thomas very much." Thomas reached over and took her hand, squeezing gently. "I wish I could have known them. They were good people," Beatrice said softly. "Papa worked hard, maybe too hard. He never complained, never made us feel like a burden even when times were tough. And Mama, she could make a feast out of almost nothing. She sang while she worked, always had a smile even when things were difficult." "You are like her," Lucy said. "The singing part anyway." They sat in comfortable silence after that, the crackle of the fire and the wind outside the only sounds. Beatrice felt content in a way she had never imagined possible during those dark days before she met Thomas. Life was still hard, the work was still demanding, but they faced it together as a family, and that made all the difference. Spring brought new life to the ranch. Several of the cows had calves, and Thomas bought some new stock at auction in Caldwell. He was building the herd slowly but surely, planning for a future where the ranch would be profitable enough to support not just them but future generations. It was in April that Beatrice realized she was pregnant. She had missed her monthly courses twice now, and there was a tenderness in her breasts that was unfamiliar. She told Thomas one evening after Lucy had gone to bed, nervous about how he would react. "I think I am going to have a baby." Thomas's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: shock, joy, wonder, and finally a grin so wide it split his face. "Truly? You are certain?" "As certain as I can be without seeing the doctor. I thought I would go into town next week and confirm it." Thomas pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "A baby, our baby. Beatrice, you have made me the happiest man alive." "You are happy then? I know it is sooner than we might have planned." "Planned? I have wanted this since the day we married. I cannot wait to see you growing round with our child, to hold our son or daughter in my arms. This is the best news you could have given me." Doc Morrison confirmed the pregnancy, estimating that the baby would arrive in late October or early November. Beatrice was healthy and strong, and he saw no reason why the pregnancy should not proceed normally. Thomas insisted she reduce her workload, much to her protests, and took on more of the household chores himself. Lucy was thrilled at the prospect of becoming an aunt, already planning all the ways she would help with the baby. "I can teach the baby to read and to ride and all sorts of things. I will be the best aunt ever." The summer passed in a golden haze of happiness. Beatrice's belly grew round and firm, and Thomas could not seem to stop touching it, marveling at the life growing inside. He talked to the baby every night, telling stories about the ranch and the family they were building, making promises about the future. One evening in late July, they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset when a rider approached. It was a young man, dusty from travel, leading a pack horses behind him. "Excuse me, are you Thomas Nash?" the rider called out. "I am. What can I do for you?" The young man dismounted and approached the porch, removing his hat respectfully. "My name is Jacob Carter. I am looking for work, and I heard in town that you might be hiring. I am good with horses and cattle, and I am willing to work hard." Thomas studied him for a moment. "Where are you coming from?" "Texas originally, but I have been drifting for a while. I am looking to settle down somewhere, put down roots." Thomas glanced at Beatrice, and she gave a small nod. They had discussed hiring another hand now that the ranch was growing, and this young man seemed earnest enough. "All right, Jacob. You can bed down in the bunkhouse with Pete and Miguel. We will try you out for a few weeks and see how it goes. Wages are $30 a month plus room and board." Jacob's face lit up with relief and gratitude. "Thank you, sir. You will not regret it, I promise." He was true to his word. Jacob proved to be a hard worker and skilled with the animals. He was also good with Lucy, treating her like a little sister and teaching her tricks for handling the horses. Beatrice liked him, though she noticed that he was quiet and seemed to carry some sadness with him. She did not pry, knowing that everyone had their own story and would share it when they were ready. As summer turned to fall, Beatrice grew larger and more uncomfortable. The baby was active, kicking and rolling, and Thomas loved to feel the movements, his hand spread across her belly with wonder in his eyes. "You hope for a boy or a girl?" Beatrice asked him one night. "I do not care either way, as long as you both come through healthy and strong. Though I will admit, I think a son would be fine. Someone to teach ranching to pass this land on to when I am gone. And if we have a daughter, then I will teach her ranching too. There is no rule that says a woman cannot run a ranch." Beatrice smiled, loving him even more for that attitude. Thomas had never treated her as lesser because of her sex, had always respected her intelligence and capabilities. She knew he would be the same with their daughter if they had one. On a cool October night, with the leaves turning gold and red across the prairie, Beatrice went into labor. Thomas rode hard to fetch Doc Morrison while Lucy stayed with her, holding her hand and trying not to look frightened. "It is all right, sweetness," Beatrice gasped between contractions. "This is natural. Women have been doing this since the beginning of time." But Lucy's face was pale, and Beatrice knew she was remembering their mother, remembering that sometimes women did not survive childbirth. "I am not going anywhere," Beatrice said firmly. "I am strong, and the doctor is coming, and everything will be fine." Thomas returned with Doc Morrison just as the contractions were getting stronger and closer together. The doctor examined Beatrice and pronounced everything to be progressing normally. Thomas wanted to stay in the room, but Doc Morrison shooed him out, saying it was no place for a husband. "That is my wife in there," Thomas protested. "I am not leaving her." "Thomas, go," Beatrice called out. "Stay with Lucy, keep her calm, I will be fine." Reluctantly, he left, but she could hear him pacing in the main room, wearing a path in the floorboards with his worry. The labor lasted through the night and into the next morning. It was hard and painful, but Beatrice drew on reserves of strength she had not known she possessed. She thought about everything she had survived, the deaths of her parents, the desperation and hunger, the fear of losing Lucy. She had come through all of that, and she would come through this too. Finally, as the sun was rising and painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, the baby came into the world with a lusty cry that echoed through the house. Doc Morrison cleaned the baby quickly and wrapped it in a blanket before handing the bundle to Beatrice. "You have a son, Mrs. Nash. A healthy, strong son." Beatrice looked down at the tiny face, red and wrinkled and perfect, and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. This was her son, hers and Thomas's, a new life they had created together out of love. "Thomas," she called out. "Thomas, come meet your son." The door burst open and Thomas rushed in, his face wild with relief and joy. He stopped beside the bed, looking down at the baby with an expression of such wonder that Beatrice felt tears spring to her eyes. "A son," he whispered. "We have a son." "Would you like to hold him?" Thomas nodded, and Beatrice carefully transferred the baby into his arms. The tiny infant looked even smaller cradled against Thomas's broad chest, and the sight of her strong cowboy husband holding their newborn son with such infinite gentleness made Beatrice fall in love with him all over again. Lucy crept into the room, her eyes wide. "Is he all right?" "Is Beatrice all right?" "We are both fine, sweetness. Come meet your nephew." Lucy approached slowly, as if afraid the baby might break, and peered at the small face. "He is so tiny. What are you going to name him?" Beatrice and Thomas looked at each other. They had discussed names but had not settled on anything definite. "What about Samuel?" Beatrice suggested. "After my father," Thomas smiled. "Samuel Nash, I like it. Welcome to the world, Samuel." The days that followed were exhausting but joyful. Samuel was a good baby, nursing well and sleeping in stretches that allowed Beatrice to rest. Thomas was a devoted father, taking on even more of the household duties, so Beatrice could focus on recovering and caring for the baby. He changed diapers without complaint, walked the floor with Samuel when he was fussy, and sang lullabies in his deep voice that seemed to soothe the infant instantly. Lucy was a doting aunt, always wanting to hold Samuel and help with his care. Beatrice was grateful for her help, and it warmed her heart to see the bond forming between Lucy and the baby. They were truly a family now, knit together by love and loyalty. Winter came early that year, and they settled into the routines of caring for a newborn while also maintaining the ranch. Thomas had hired another hand to help with the increased workload, an older man named Henry who had decades of ranching experience. Together with Pete, Miguel and Jacob. They kept the ranch running smoothly even in the harshest weather. One snowy evening in January, while they were all gathered around the fireplace with Samuel sleeping in a cradle Thomas had built, Lucy looked up from the scarf she was knitting and said, "I have been thinking about something." "What is that, sweetness?" Beatrice asked. "I am 15 now, almost 16. In a few years I will be grown. I have been wondering what I should do with my life." Thomas set down the harness he was mending. "What do you want to do?" "I think I want to be a teacher. I like learning and I like explaining things to people. And there are so many children around here who do not have access to proper schooling." Beatrice felt a rush of pride. Her little sister, wanting to become a teacher. "I think that is a wonderful idea, Lucy. You would be an excellent teacher. But I would need more education myself first. There is a teaching college in Wichita. I could go there after I turn 18 and get my certification." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "That is a good plan. We can help with the tuition when the time comes." Lucy's face brightened. "Really? You would do that, of course. You are family, Lucy. We want to see you succeed." Beatrice reached over and squeezed Thomas's hand, loving him for his generosity and for the way he had embraced Lucy as his own sister. This was what family was supposed to be, she thought. People who supported each other, who wanted the best for each other, who worked together toward common goals. The years passed in a blur of work and joy and the ordinary miracles of daily life. Samuel grew from a baby into a toddler, sturdy and curious, following his father around the ranch on chubby legs. Lucy went off to teaching college in Wichita, and they missed her terribly, but were proud of her determination to make something of herself. Beatrice became pregnant again when Samuel was 3, and this time they were blessed with a daughter they named Rose, after Thomas's mother. She had her father's gray eyes and her mother's blonde hair, and she wrapped Thomas around her little finger from the moment she drew breath. Lucy came home from college during summers and holidays, full of stories about her studies and her plans for the future. She graduated with honors and took a teaching position in Caldwell, much to everyone's delight. She boarded with Mrs. Henderson during the week and came home to the ranch on weekends, becoming an integral part of Samuel and Rose's lives. When Samuel was 6 and Rose was 3, Beatrice realized she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was more difficult, and Doc Morrison warned her that she needed to take it easy. Thomas hired additional help for the house and insisted Beatrice rest as much as possible. Their third child, a boy they named Daniel, arrived in the spring, smaller than his siblings had been but healthy nonetheless. Beatrice recovered slowly, and Doc Morrison told her gently that she should probably not have any more children, that another pregnancy could be dangerous for her health. Thomas, overhearing this conversation, immediately said, "Then we are done. 3 children is a blessing, and I will not risk Beatrice's life for more." Beatrice was relieved, if a bit sad. She had always imagined having a large family, but 3 children was more than enough to keep them busy. Samuel was already showing an aptitude for ranching, following Thomas everywhere and asking endless questions about the cattle and horses. Rose was more interested in helping Beatrice in the house and garden, but she also had a stubborn, independent streak that promised she would be a force to be reckoned with as she grew older. Daniel was still too young to show much personality beyond being a generally happy baby. Lucy met a man at church one Sunday, a schoolteacher from a neighboring town named David Miller. He was quiet and studious, with kind eyes and a gentle manner. Lucy brought him home to meet the family, and Beatrice could see immediately that her sister was in love. "What do you think of him?" Lucy asked nervously after David had left. "I think he seems like a good man," Beatrice said honestly. "Do you love him?" "I do. Very much. He asked me to marry him, and I said yes. I wanted to tell you and Thomas before we made it official." Beatrice pulled her sister into a hug. "I am so happy for you, Lucy. You deserve all the love in the world." Thomas gave his blessing as well, and Lucy and David were married that summer in the same little church where Beatrice and Thomas had spoken their vows. It was a joyful occasion, with Samuel and Rose serving as ring bearer and flower girl, and little Daniel sleeping peacefully through the ceremony in Beatrice's arms. After the wedding, life settled into a new rhythm. Lucy and David moved into a house in Caldwell, where they both taught at the local school. They visited the ranch often, and Lucy confided to Beatrice that she was hoping to start a family of her own soon. Beatrice was now 32, and Thomas was 37. They had been married for over a decade, and their love had only deepened with time. They still made time for each other despite the demands of the ranch and children, taking evening walks when the weather was nice, talking about everything and nothing while the stars wheeled overhead. One night, lying in bed with Thomas's arm around her, Beatrice thought back to that day in Miller's General Store, when she had been caught stealing bread and her life had seemed hopeless. She thought about how terrified she had been, how ashamed, and how Thomas had stepped forward and changed everything. "Thank you," she said softly. Thomas stirred. "For what?" "For saving us. For giving us a home and a family and a life worth living." He was quiet for a moment, his hand stroking her hair. "You saved me too, you know. I was so lonely before you came, so focused on work that I had forgotten how to truly live. You taught me how to laugh again, how to hope, how to love. We saved each other, Beatrice." She turned in his arms to kiss him, pouring all her love and gratitude into that kiss. After all these years, his touch still thrilled her, still made her feel like a young woman falling in love for the first time. The ranch continued to prosper. Thomas had built it into one of the most successful operations in the area, with a large herd and a reputation for quality livestock. He took on more responsibility in the community, serving on the town council and helping to resolve disputes between ranchers. Beatrice was active in the church and had become known for her charitable work, always ready to help families in need the way Thomas had once helped her. Samuel grew into a tall, strong young man, the image of his father in both looks and temperament. He took over more and more of the ranch work, allowing Thomas to slow down a bit as he approached his 50s. Rose was spirited and independent, insisting on learning everything her brother learned despite Thomas's initial reluctance to teach a girl such rough work. She proved to be a natural horsewoman and could rope a steer as well as any of the hired hands. Daniel was quieter than his siblings, more given to books and learning than physical labor, though he did his share of work without complaint. He reminded Beatrice of Lucy, thoughtful and introspective, and she wondered if he might pursue education the way his aunt had. Lucy and David had 2 children of their own, twin girls named Emma and Grace, who adored their older cousins and loved visiting the ranch. Family gatherings were loud and chaotic and wonderful, filled with children's laughter and good food, and the kind of deep contentment that comes from being surrounded by people you love. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Thomas took Beatrice into Wichita for a special dinner at the finest restaurant in the city. She wore a new dress he had bought for her, deep green silk that made her eyes sparkle, and he wore his best suit. They looked at each other across the candlelit table and marveled at how far they had come. 20 years, Thomas said, raising his glass. 20 years since the luckiest day of my life, when I walked into Miller's General Store and found you. I think I was the lucky one, Beatrice countered. You could have walked away, could have let Mr. Miller call the sheriff. But you did not. You showed me kindness when I needed it most. I showed you kindness and you gave me everything. A home, a family, a reason to build something lasting. You made me believe in the goodness of life again after I had lost that belief. They toasted to the past and the future, to the life they had built together and the years still to come. Later that night, in the hotel room Thomas had rented for a special treat, they made love with the passion and tenderness of long familiarity, knowing each other's bodies as well as they knew their own. The years continued to pass. Samuel married a girl from a neighboring ranch, a capable woman named Margaret who fit into the family beautifully. They built a house on Nash land, close enough to the main house for convenience but far enough for privacy, and began working toward the day when Samuel would take over the ranch entirely. Rose surprised everyone by announcing she wanted to become a veterinarian, a nearly unheard-of ambition for a woman in that era. But she was determined, and with Thomas and Beatrice's support, she gained admission to a veterinary program in Kansas City. She excelled in her studies and returned to the area to open a practice, becoming the first female veterinarian in that part of Kansas. Daniel went to university and became a lawyer, settling in Wichita but coming home often to visit. He married a woman he met at college, an intelligent suffragette named Catherine, who challenged him intellectually and made him laugh. Thomas and Beatrice watched their children build their own lives with pride and a bit of wistfulness. The house was quieter now, with just the two of them most days, but it was a comfortable quiet. They had reached the season of life where they could slow down, could spend time together without the demands of young children, could reflect on all they had accomplished. Lucy remained close, her teaching career flourishing and her own children growing up to be fine young people. She and Beatrice talked often, sharing the bond of sisters who had survived hardship together and come out stronger on the other side. On a warm summer evening when Beatrice was 55 and Thomas was 60, they sat on the porch as they had done countless times over the years, watching the sun set over the prairie. The ranch was quiet, most of the hands having gone home for supper, and the only sounds were the peaceful ones of cattle lowing in the distance and birds singing their evening songs. "You ever think about how different our lives might have been?" Beatrice asked. "If you had not been in that store that day." Thomas reached over and took her hand, his fingers lacing through hers with the ease of long practice. "I think about it sometimes. And then I say a prayer of thanks that I was exactly where I needed to be, exactly when I needed to be there. I still cannot believe sometimes that all this is real, that I am not going to wake up back in that tent on the edge of town, desperate and alone. It is real, my love, all of it. The good and the hard, the joy and the sorrow, the life we built together. It is all real." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened and the stars began to appear, one by one. Beatrice thought about the twists and turns that had led her to this moment, this life. She thought about her parents and how she hoped they would be proud of the woman she had become. She thought about Lucy, now a grandmother herself, and how far they had both come from those desperate days of their youth. Most of all, she thought about Thomas, about the man who had seen her at her lowest point and offered not judgment but compassion, who had looked past the circumstances of that moment to see the person she truly was, who had given her not just a job but a home, not just security but love, not just a present but a future. "I love you," she said, the words inadequate to express the depth of her feeling but the best she had to offer. Thomas turned to her, his face creased with age now but still the face she loved more than any other. "I love you too, Beatrice. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, and I thank God for you every single day." As the night deepened around them, and they sat together on the porch of the house that had been their haven for over 3 decades, Beatrice Baker Nash felt a profound sense of peace. Her life had not turned out the way she had once imagined it might. It had been harder in some ways, full of challenges and struggles she could never have anticipated as a young girl. But it had also been infinitely richer, more joyful, more meaningful than anything she could have dreamed. She had known true love with a man who cherished her. She had raised children who had grown into good, capable adults. She had built a life of purpose and meaning, had found her place in the world and made it her own. All because of one moment, one act of kindness, one man who had chosen mercy over judgment and changed two lives forever. The years that followed were peaceful ones, the reward for a lifetime of hard work and dedication. Thomas and Beatrice gradually passed the ranch operations fully to Samuel and Margaret, who ran it with the same care and dedication Thomas had always shown. Rose's veterinary practice thrived, and she became known throughout the region for her skill and compassion with animals. Daniel's law practice prospered, and he occasionally took on cases for families who could not afford legal representation, showing the same generous spirit his father had. Grandchildren came, and then great-grandchildren, each generation learning the stories of how Thomas and Beatrice had met, how their grandmother had once been so desperate she had tried to steal bread to feed her sister, how their grandfather had paid for that bread and offered something far more valuable than money could buy, a chance at a new life. Lucy passed away peacefully at the age of 72, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, with Beatrice holding her hand. It was a profound loss, but Beatrice took comfort in knowing that her sister had lived a full, happy life, had achieved her dreams and known love and joy. At the funeral, Beatrice spoke about the little girl who had been so sick and fragile and the strong woman she had become, and there was not a dry eye in the church. Thomas and Beatrice celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary with a huge party at the ranch, with what seemed like half of Kansas in attendance. Their children and grandchildren gave speeches, sharing stories and memories that made everyone laugh and cry. Thomas and Beatrice danced together under the stars, moving slowly to the music, their steps as synchronized as their hearts had been for 5 decades. 50 years, Beatrice whispered against his chest. "Can you believe it? Every day with you has been a gift," Thomas replied. "I would do it all again in a heartbeat." Thomas passed away at the age of 75, peacefully in his sleep with Beatrice beside him. She woke that morning to find him gone, his face peaceful, his hand still holding hers. The grief was overwhelming, a physical pain that took her breath away. But even in her sorrow, she was grateful for the life they had shared, for every moment they had been given together. She lived another 10 years without him, surrounded by family, still active in the community, still finding purpose and meaning in each day. She told stories about Thomas to the great-grandchildren who had never met him, making sure they knew what kind of man he had been. Kind, generous, hardworking, loving. On a sunny spring morning at the age of 85, Beatrice Baker Nash closed her eyes for the last time. She was in her own bed, in the house Thomas had brought her to over 60 years earlier, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who loved her. As her breathing slowed and her heart prepared to take its final beats, her last thoughts were of that day in Caldwell so many years ago. She thought of the frightened young woman she had been, clutching a loaf of bread and thinking her life was over. She thought of the tall cowboy who had stepped forward and changed everything with a simple act of kindness. And she thought of Thomas, waiting for her somewhere beyond this life, ready to take her hand again and walk with her into whatever came next. She smiled, her face peaceful, and let go. At her funeral, Samuel spoke about his mother's strength and kindness, about how she had built a legacy not just through her children but through the countless lives she had touched with her generosity and compassion. He spoke about how she had taught them all that where you start in life matters, less than what you do with the chances you are given. The Nash Ranch continued through the generations, a testament to the love between a desperate woman and a compassionate cowboy. A reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can change the course of lives and create ripples that spread far beyond anything we can imagine. And in Caldwell, Kansas, the story of Thomas and Beatrice Nash became legend, told and retold as an example of what it means to see beyond circumstances to the person underneath, to choose mercy over judgment, to believe in second chances and the transformative power of love. It was a story that began with a loaf of stolen bread and a man who chose to pay for it rather than let a frightened woman be punished. It continued through decades of shared work and joy and sorrow, through children raised and a ranch built, through a love that deepened and grew stronger with each passing year. And it ended not with death, but with a legacy that would carry on for generations. A family tree with roots deep in kindness and branches reaching toward the sky. Theirs was a simple story in many ways, without great drama or adventure beyond the ordinary trials of frontier life. But it was also an extraordinary story, because it proved that real love, the kind that lasts a lifetime and beyond, is built not on grand gestures but on daily choices to be kind, to be patient, to be faithful, to show up for each other day after day, year after year. From a moment of desperation in a general store to a love story that would span more than half a century, Thomas Nash and Beatrice Baker built something that mattered, something that lasted, something that changed not just their own lives but the lives of everyone they touched. And it all began because a cowboy saw a woman in need, and instead of turning away, he stepped forward and said the words that would change both their lives forever. "Come home with me."